Hey, this is Michael Lindsay from Vital MX. We're out here at Fox Raceway today with the 2025 Kawasaki KX450. Now let's be straight up. This isn't a BNG bike, but it's about as close as you can be. Bold new graphics and an air filter update and an ECU update. Not much going on for 25. 2024 was an all new machine. So for this first impression, I'm gonna go through a little bit more of things I've learned with the bike over the past year. With the 2024 model, I spent a total between two bikes of around 80 or 90 riding hours. So I've tried a bunch of little things to the bike, things I wanted to work on, and I've kind of got maybe a little bit more of a round and complete opinion of what I think this bike's positives are and its negatives. But first, talk about the two updates. The air filter is now domed instead of flat. It has a little bit more surface area, fairly similar to Twin Air's Power Flow kit, which I was running on my last bike. A little bit larger surface area, tiny bit better response, but mostly the filter has more surface area to get dirty. The ECU update is no difference for the base ECU map, but the ECU had to be updated to basically have new parameters where on their app, the Rideology app, you can modify the map to a wider range. You can go farther with your ignition and fuel curves, which we did try today. If you want my broken down initial thoughts of the bike, check out the 2024 video. It'll be in the description below and probably pinned in the first comment. But overall, my thoughts after riding the bike was the KX450 last year probably had the widest operating range of any 450 in the class. And what I mean by operating range is setup. You set up the bike and that setup works across a wider amount of tracks than pretty much anything else in the class. It doesn't always have the peak performance of say the Honda or even the Yamaha or an Austrian bike when it's perfectly dialed in. But again, that setup works across a wider range of tracks without needing as much fiddling. And also the setups that work on the bike seem to be wider in my opinion. Things that you can do, whether you want to rake the bike out, put more weight on the front, etc. It tends to not overreact to changes as much as some of its competitors. For me personally, the bike is a little bit misbalanced out of the box. It is better than prior years, but it still puts a little bit too much weight on the front. And because of having a softer power character, it feels a little bit heavy on the front end. Not a huge deal out here in SoCal or basically West Coast conditions where it's hard packed and you want the front end to feel planted. But I do feel that when you get into softer conditions, probably more you find on the East Coast, you will think that the bike maybe feels physically a bit heavy because the power response isn't really there to pick it up, and also the front end just seems to have a front weight bias a little bit. Things like triple clamps and offset races do change the character of the front a little bit, but they don't change some of that front end heaviness. Actually, what affected that the most for me is some of the things I did for the power. Starting first with the stock power, I say it again, I labeled this bike the KX350 last year. It's not far off that. It is the mellowest 450 in class. It is good in situations. It is very linear. It is fun to ride because you can get near your maximum out of the bike. But there are just times compared to the 450s, it doesn't have punch. I know that sounds crazy. We always say 450s are so fast, but you also buy a 450 because there's times you want that power. And there are times where the stock KX450 just feels lacking. Torque, grunt, RPM build when it's soft, getting over bigger jumps. You just have to ride the bike harder than some of its competitors. My personal bike that I rode last year, I never did any internal engine mods, but I did Vortex ECU, tried a couple different pipes, heavily modified the airbox, and tried some race fuel. Those combinations, mostly pipes with the airbox, I was getting upwards, pipe, airbox, and ECU on pump gas. I was getting places in RPM range, I was getting 6 to 7 horsepower more, match it up, or 6 to 7 horsepower more, and matching it up with race fuel, we were getting close to 9. My personal bike is maybe a little bit too aggressive. After jumping back on the stalker, I've realized that a little bit, but I'd like to find something split in the middle because my bike feels lighter, my personal one to ride, because that power is more aggressive and it picks up the front end. It does some of the work for you. So it's still, when I think of this bike and go, man, it feels heavy on the front, sometimes the power character can help that, and that's the first thing I would look at. It's really easy to get power out of this bike with an ECU, with a pipe. It's a very choked down bike stock. It's one of the, whether it's a Yosh, a Pro Circuit, FMF, anything, I haven't felt this big of a difference in exhaust in a long time, and they really do help this motorcycle. But the bright side again is the base platform is so easy to work off. It's neutral. The frame itself is so comfortable. The suspension components have a lot of range of adjustability. Again, I feel like the front fork is a bit soft compared to the rear shock. That's easy enough to tune out with a tuner. I tried a couple different aftermarket sets, was fairly happy with different ones depending what we're looking for. The ergos are standard Cowie, very neutral, very easy to ride. A couple other things I tried is gearing. I did try going up a tooth because of the softness of the character. It works in some tracks. More open tracks, you're up in third and fourth a lot more in the corners because second does go through quick when you're up a tooth. But at times second goes by too quick. So some tracks I'm on stock gearing, some tracks I like being up a tooth. It's a little in between. It's very much personal preference. Bike stock wheelbase is pretty short. I do like how it turns. Long wheelbase does make the bike feel longer and more planted in certain situations, or just gives the bike a longer character, but it also reduces turning at times. A long wheelbase wasn't the magic answer. It was good in some areas, not good in others. Basically what I'm getting at is the KX450 is a great base platform. I think a lot of upgrades are very applicable to this motorcycle, and it's also a very fun bike to modify. Overall, I don't have a huge negative standout with the Kawi that really makes me shy away from the bike. There's just things I would like to improve, but I think the base bones of the motorcycle is quite good. If you have any questions or thoughts about different upgrades for this bike, different things about the character and how to solve them, please throw them in the comments section below. I'd be glad to answer them. And as always, thanks for watching.